Hey, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are around the world. So, hi, it's Dorina. I am a poet, a published writer, and a healing writing coach, and a podcaster as well. So, today I promised that I would talk about podcasting, and I probably won't go about it the way you want to go about it, like tips and tricks and whatever. So, what I'm going to tell you is the 5 things that I wish I knew when I started a podcast. The first thing that I wish I knew when I started the podcast is I need to learn how to edit. There's so many things that you need to do during a podcast. Because I'm on the basic level, but then if you're on the advanced level, like some of the people that I know who work in the music industry and who produce music, so they use loop, yeah. So that is the one thing that I knew that I wish I'd known, that editing takes a lot of time, because sometimes you can have a guest who will just keep talking and they will just, maybe they'll keep saying or they'll keep snapping or they'll get nervous, and so in a way to make it sound cohesive and continuous. So sometimes you have to edit, and then sometimes people may say things, so maybe it could be offensive, not that that's a bad thing, but also you never want to put your guest in bad light, or in a way maybe you said something and you realize that it was inappropriate. So I'm not saying that don't speak your truth. What I'm saying is editing is very important because it makes it more professional, and also it makes it more reachable. Because there's once I was a guest at a podcast, and someone didn't tell me that it was it was my fault. I didn't do research. So on there, I'd listened to the podcast, but like you put it on and you do other things. So I didn't realize that I was supposed to be there face to face. So then I ended up going on the podcast without makeup. So, and then I had this pimple on my forehead that I kept like touching. And then later when I was looking at the video, I'm like, why did I do that? Anyway, so that is one of the things that I wish I'd known. Two, the thing that I wish I'd known when I started a podcast is there's so many free platforms. So the thing is, my first podcast was actually on this platform where you had to go on live, and it was free for the first 30 minutes, and if you wanted to have it for longer, you had to pay, and maybe it was like about $234 a year, or it was up to, and some point it was up to 500. But then the good thing is like you'd have Skype guests, and it was like a real radio show. Some people could call in, and the first thing that I did was just go on live. I just went on live, and I had to put money on my VoIP to actually call into the show, and then they would do the countdown for me, and then I would be talking. But if I'd known that there were many other platforms where you can just record from your phone, because there's Spreaker, there's so many other platforms that you can have for free. So when you're starting out, start out with the free platforms, and then as it grows, then you can use other platforms, because Stitcher is very popular, Podbean is popular, SoundCloud. But also compare the prices and see if you are willing to pay, compare the prices and see what is relevant for you. The third thing I wish I knew when I had a podcast, or when I started out a podcast, is I need to not read directly because before, from my script, because in the beginning it was like I didn't know what to say. I was nervous and I was scared of just going all the time. And tell me where you're watching from. It would be really good to know. Okay, so the thing is, so one of my friends used to work in radio, and she studied journalism, and she listened, and she's like, yeah, we can tell that you're reading and your topics are great, but they're a bit long, so then you should make it continuous and it should sound like a conversation. And so then I was just reading directly, and then no intonation whatsoever. But then now, basically, I realized that I don't have scripts. I just talk off the fly. And I've learned to basically come up with the most important points that I need to push across or put across. And that is one thing that I wish I had known before I started, instead of, because when you read so many different blogs, they tell you this is what you need to do and all that. But then one thing I must say is just go with the flow and go with how you're feeling. And yes. And then the other thing, the fourth thing that I wish I had known before I started a podcast, was how much marketing it involves. Because me just saying, okay, I have a podcast, it means I have to join podcast groups, I have to join different people talking about podcasts. And then sometimes in podcast groups where some people tell you, oh, we've got 10,000 downloads, we've got this and that, and you're there like starting out and you're feeling so intimidated. And that is the one thing that I wish I knew, that it involves a lot of marketing. Because when I started my podcast, I spent a lot of time on Twitter, so it was easier to promote it. But then now there are so many different platforms, so you need to know which one works best for you. And you also need to not ditch the platform that you started out with, because there are people who followed you for a reason. So you also need to create content for them. And I know I'm guilty of this, especially here and on Twitter, because Twitter was my first love. I loved it. But then right now, I've been trying to focus on Instagram, because I was feeling like I was a more visual person. So like when it comes to marketing, creating the posters, your headshots, all that, because it's how you present yourself. And also when people out there see you, they talk about, they'll be like, oh yeah, I listened to your podcast. Oh yeah, this was interesting and stuff. So in a way, it allows you to put yourself out there. So that is one of the things that I wish I knew about starting a podcast. So the fifth and last reason that I wish I knew before starting a podcast was the length. Because some people say they don't listen to podcasts that are more than 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. Some people have podcasts that go on for hours, they're long. And I basically, it was hard because some people who were working in the industry, in the media industry, were like, oh, it needs to be short. But the thing is, if you have an important topic, your podcast is your platform. So do what you can with it and make sure that your content is relevant to your audience. For example, with me, I talk about everything because I'm under the sun, because I have an entrepreneurial background. So I try to always talk about people who've managed to not walk the path that is probably not what people would say normal. Like, for example, I've had authors, I've had sommeliers, I've had coaches, I've had singers, songwriters, artists, basically, and things like that, things of that nature. So that is probably jobs or things that people have not really talked about. And also, for example, I had a guest who talked about autism and all that stuff. So make sure that the guests that you have resonate with you, because you could probably have a guest and they probably don't do the same things that you do, but there has to be some sort of form of alignment. So that is a bonus thing. When you have guests or you agree to be on a podcast, make sure you listen to the podcast first and decide whether you want to be a guest or not, because sometimes you can listen and in your head you're thinking, I'm really not feeling like I'm aligned to this. Maybe they use language that you're not really comfortable with, or they say things that you're not really comfortable with. So you have to go with alignment, because sometimes I've heard of people who end up being on a show and then it just does not really put them in the best light. So be careful of that. So just make sure that things align to what you would like to put out for yourself. For example, my friend Carol, she has her conversation. So she's talking about spirituality and becoming her, which is her is higher energetic resonance, however you pronounce that word. So she has female or women who are doing different things in the spiritual world. Some of them are healers, some of them are doulas, some of them are, but then they're all doing things holistically. So she aligned herself to get those type of guests. And there's some people who are in the wine industry who basically talk about wine. I have my friend Maya Parrish. She has a podcast. It's called Tipsy and Grown, so it's for over 40. And what people talk about, basically she talks about three things. She talks about wine, she talks about food, and then she talks about Tipsy and Grown, like stuff that people experience over 40. So, and then she's aligned herself because she has been working in the food industry for some time. So she is, so then that's what she's doing. Another friend, her name is Natalie, and she has this podcast as well, but then she decided to go the route of having a blog and making the blog become a podcast. So hers is, I'm sorry, Natalie, I don't remember what your podcast is, but it's about, and also one of my coaches has a podcast, and that is, her name's Tiffany Lanier, and you can find it also on Spotify. So, and her podcast is A Modern Visionary. So there are many people, and basically she talks about leaders, conscious leadership and all that stuff. So have a theme. When you have, that's a bonus thing. Have a theme when you're thinking of starting a podcast. Because when I started up my podcast back when it was in 2014, it was a hot mess. But that hot mess was me doing trial and error. So you can imagine just going on and just talking and just seeing a red dot there telling you that you have 30 minutes and then trying to count down and trying not to sound nervous. And I threw myself in the deep end. So now I've realized that now that I have all the tools, and the other thing about podcasting too is just use the tools that you have. You can just use a phone. Use the recording device you have, and you preferably use earphones because then if you just go directly on and use this voice without the earphones, then there'll be some weird echo. But you always use earphones if you can, because somehow blocks out the voice. And some people actually don't. And then think about the equipment. Sometimes you don't need to really buy expensive equipment. You could find a mic for €5 or 500 shillings and use it, and it might be tiny, and just use it with your phone to record, and it can just improve the quality of your podcast. So I actually should get going, but I really hope that this has been helpful. So remember, the five things that you need to know basically is that you can do it for free. Just know about the length, be consistent, or know your theme, and then you don't necessarily need a script, and learn how to edit. Like that's basically, and the marketing part as well. So those are the most important things. So because most of these people with the really big podcasts, some of them have teams who've helped them with the marketing. And because I'm seeing all these people who are actors or who've been in an industry, so then they get more people following them because people already knew who they were, and then they are very impressed by their expertise. So you can also become an expert of something and do your research as well. So I hope that this was really helpful. And if you have anything, it doesn't matter where you are around the world, and we're connected, then I can mention your things as well, like whether you're having a yoga retreat, whether you're doing something, whether you have a book coming out, just let me know, and I will happily let you all know. But anyway, thanks for watching. You can find me here. You can email me, and oh yeah, one more thing. My audiobook is going to be out. I'm super excited about that. So let me know if you prefer audiobooks to ebooks. Tell me yes, because I did a poll yesterday and actually people actually prefer audiobooks to ebooks. And I do understand why, because actually when I started getting into ebooks, it was kind of hard because, like reading and scrolling. But then like with an audiobook, it was just nice having my earphones and just being wherever I'm going. And it was nice to actually read a book. But the only thing that it was like when you're somewhere and it's loud and then you skip, you don't hear what someone's saying and then you have to stop and then kind of rewind. But anyway, yeah, so the audiobook basically will be out 4th of February. And I really, really hope that you will enjoy it. It's just all blood, sweat, and tears. And anyway, so I need to get going. Just comment below if you have any other questions with podcasts, and I will speak to you all soon. Take care. Bye.